Welcome back. City Power will take over electricity supply from Eskom in some Johannesburg suburbs, including Soweto. Residents in Soweto owe Eskom 12 billion rand. There has been ongoing electricity crisis in the city, with many residents calling for urgent intervention. Many residents in the city say, why do they even pay for basic services such as electricity when they sit in the dark most of the time? Vandalism and aging infrastructure could possibly be some of the causes. To discuss this, we are joined by Tsediso Thipanyane from the Human Rights Commission, Nancy Maluleke, the acting CEO of City Power, as well as Asenathi Tukela from the Socio-Economic Rights Institute. Thank you so much for your time. This is a very important discussion given the fact that we're moving into local government elections and there are many issues on the ground. I'm going to start with you, Nancy. City Power is not the favourite at the moment in the city of Johannesburg, given what we are experiencing. Despite the fact that there's load shedding, there's also other issues that City Power is dealing with that causes many residential areas and suburbs to be without electricity. What is the actual problem? Why is this not getting better?
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. The challenges that we are facing at City Power relate to theft and vandalism on our network, and also the illegally connected customers that are not paying for the electricity, and hence straining our network, and it leads to power trips because our transformers cannot carry the load of the unplanned load which is connected illegally.
Okay, Asenathi, maybe I can come over to you. So many would argue that this is unacceptable, that it's basic services such as water and electricity that residents should not be begging for, complaining for. As the Institute, have you received complaints, especially when it comes to issues of electricity? Have you dealt with this? How serious is the problem?
Thank you so much, Heidi. Yes, we have dealt with so many issues relating to electricity, and most of them relate to disconnections of electricity, which we find very arbitrary and unlawful, because you see, the point of view is to understand that electricity is a right. It is a right according to the Constitution, and that makes it a basic services that ought to be delivered. And if you understand it in that way, you understand that the Constitution, the vision of the Constitution is to provide a dignified life for everyone. And dignity comes with the provision of basic rights and basic services to everyone.
You just heard the acting CEO of City Power indicating that there's issues such as vandalism and non-payments. Now, we have come out of a devastating lockdown with various levels. People have lost their jobs. People are unable to keep up with their bills. Do you think that this should have been something that City Power considered before cutting off electricity, or before the situation got to the point where it's now? I wish we had those visuals, but if you just go to City Power's Twitter page, you will see almost every hour, if not every 5 minutes, there's an outage, there's an issue, there's a planned outage, there's vandalism, there's infrastructure issues. Surely this should have been something that they considered. As you mentioned, electricity is a right.
Yes, definitely. I mean, if you take the point of view of understanding electricity as a basic service and as a right, then you understand the importance and the agency of providing this on a consistent basis, and avoiding and taking endeavors to ensure that there is no interrupted access to electricity. Most of the issues that affect the right to access to electricity are administrative problems that can easily be fixed if there was political will to do so. And this is the point of view that we always take, and this is the position that we assume.
Okay, great. Let's bring in the Human Rights Commission, Tsediso Thipanyane, the CEO of the Human Rights Commission. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. I want to touch on a report that the South African Human Rights Commission filed or conducted with regards to the issue. I know it's on water, but the issue about the water issue in Hammanskraal and how this was a violation of human rights. Do you think what's going on in the city of Joburg, where there's constant blackouts and constant outages, is this a violation of human rights?
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Electricity is a fundamental human right, even though it's not recognized per se. Statutory law, there's an obligation on government to provide electricity. In terms of international law, there's an obligation to provide electricity. So what we are seeing for the last 5 years or so is definitely a failure by our government to provide a right which is basically crucial to realize all other rights, rights to education, the right to empower women, the right to empower, to develop our economy. So definitely a lot more has to be done by government to address this problem. So the issues of whether people are paying electricity or not, that's not the issue at this point in time. There's an obligation. Section 7 requires our government to do everything to provide human rights. That's why people are paying tax. So a lot of these issues are largely due to mismanagement by government and failure by local government to provide a right which is so fundamental to all other rights in our country.
Sure. Nancy, I want you to respond to this because you've had the Human Rights Commission and the Socio-Economic Rights Institute saying it's a basic human right to have electricity. And if I can count how many times just my area alone has not had electricity, it's shocking. People are working from home as well now because of the pandemic. What do you have to say about the fact that this is a violation of our rights?
Okay, I think as a city, we also have social programs which cater for the elements of human rights. We've got a program at the city of Johannesburg which is called Expanded Social Program, where we offer free basic electricity to customers that cannot afford. That covers the unemployed, the senior citizens, and also the youth and people living with disabilities. So what the range in terms of the free basic electricity that we offer, it's from 50 kilowatt hours up to 150 kilowatt hours, and that should then at least subsidize the human rights element where customers cannot afford to pay electricity, because unfortunately the infrastructure comes at a costly capex investment. And at the same time, we've got businesses that are then affected negatively by informal settlements that illegally connect themselves. Then it has a negative impact on the economic growth of the whole economy.
Sure. Well, I hear that you're saying there are programs to assist with those that cannot afford electricity, that cannot pay electricity. Those that are paying still don't have it. They don't have access to it because there's either vandalism, the infrastructure can't handle the capacity. Would you not agree that this is a violation and that something urgently needs to be done? These problems aren't new. Okay.
I think from that perspective, in terms of the continuity of supply, it's a challenge in the energy sector, which all the power utilities are working on now, where the capacity that we have on our grid is inadequate to cover for the demand in the network. And from that perspective, hence, you've got adverse situations like load shedding, where we would rotate through the Eskom load rotation or load shedding program. And unfortunately, that has a negative impact also on the municipalities that buy electricity from Eskom. And but for us to avert that, we are venturing into alternative energy solutions that would then increase our generation capacity. And at the same time, we always urge customers to be cognizant of energy efficiency initiatives for them to demand less and put energy savings equipment in their houses and to lower their consumption level.
Sure. Asenathi, I just want to touch on the fact that you have areas, even though City Power is not yet dealing with areas like Soweto, but you have areas like Alex where there's illegal connections. People are opting to go the illegal routes other than paying for electricity. In terms of what do you think should be done to deal with the demand that there is, but people not in a position? People have gone through the most in the last year because of COVID, even pre-COVID. We have an economy and a very high unemployment rate. What should be done from a socio-economic side to deal with this? Because you're hearing the issues, you're hearing how it just doesn't seem to be getting better. What should be done?
So I think that the real issue here is the issue of housing. And if we look at it from that perspective, we'll understand that if people are not provided with adequate housing, they will opt for their own alternatives of providing their own housing for themselves. That's why you find that Alex is constituted by mostly shacks or informal dwellers. And when people erect the structures, there's going to be an increasing need for them to have electricity. We live in an industrial world. And because there is lack of housing, lack of adequate housing, which includes in access to electricity, proper connections to electricity, people are going to opt for illegal connections. And that is the real issue here. The state, through its different bodies, local government, provincial government, should provide housing to the people, adequate housing, which includes access to basic services, including electricity. And that is the point of view. And if we take it from that point of view, we'll understand that most of the issues that arise out of the right to access electricity are directly linked to the people being unable to access other rights and other basic services.
Sure. I'm going to come back to Tsediso from the Human Rights Commission. Speak to us about how serious the situation is in terms of complaints that the Human Rights Commission has received, specifically regarding the electricity crisis in the city. Has it gotten worse in the last year or so? We know load shedding is here to stay. Eskom can't actually give a definitive answer when it's going to end. But when can we expect, what is the actual situation with regards to those complaints? Okay, it seems as though we can't get a hold of Tsediso, which is quite unfortunate. It would have been great to just get some clarity on that. But speak to us about, Asenathi, about, okay, it seems as though he's back. Tsediso, just hope it's not load shedding or a power failure on your side. Just speak to us about the complaints that you've possibly received in the last year, specifically linked to the lack of electricity and the constant blackouts we are experiencing in the city.
Yeah, look, we don't really have many complaints in that sense because, I think people are still battling to understand and accept that electricity is a fundamental human right. And I think the same problem also with government and local government, that those who are responsible for providing electricity do not see it as a right and therefore they don't respond to it in that manner. And we need a change of mindset. So in the same manner, if our citizens also understand this is actually a fundamental human right, then they'll also be making more demands on the government to provide electricity. It's not a favor which government is doing to us. It's a right. People are paying tax. Governments are instituted in order to provide these rights. So I think we do need to take these things a bit more seriously. So yes, we get complaints around lack of water, sanitation, many, many other issues, which also again points to the inability of some components of government to do their work, to meet their own constitutional obligations to provide good governance, to provide for rights, and electricity, which also is very important to improve our economy. So if our economy collapses, we then don't have the ability to provide for human rights.
And then, Tsediso, let's just ask you this question. We're moving into local government elections. We've seen the president out door-to-door campaigns and in Soweto promising to address the issue of the electricity crisis, especially in Soweto, where almost every day there's unrest in Soweto because of the electricity crisis. Do you believe it's fair for there to be a flat rate in areas where people say we can't afford to be paying for electricity? Is this something government should consider, and is this something that is fair on those who have a higher consumption of electricity but are only allowed to be paying a flat rate because this is what government is deciding to do to deal with the electricity crisis?
Our constitution is very clear that those who cannot take care of themselves, who cannot provide social service for themselves, government has an obligation to provide social assistance to those who cannot take care of themselves. That's why we pay pensioners and child support grants. So the same thing should also apply to electricity, because it's a fundamental right. It's a right which we need to fulfill other rights. Those who cannot provide for themselves. The state must assist them. That is the role of the state, or any state anywhere which is worth its name in gold.
So do you believe government has failed in this regard?
Certainly, without any doubt.
Sure. Nancy, what do you have to say about that? The fact that it's a right and that electricity is a huge problem, especially in the city of Johannesburg, and it just seems as though it's getting worse by the day.
Okay, so what we are doing from a city power perspective to prevent the illegal connections, we have a normalization program where we go and electrify informal settlements. But unfortunately, that also is a capex cost, and the government funding also reduces by the years. And so what we do, we normalize to ensure that they are legally connected, and we meter to ensure that they can pay at an acceptable tariff rate. And also we ensure that we continue to remove those illegal connections because they are a risk for the community safety. We've got fatalities that are attracted on a yearly basis due to the illegally connected households. And unfortunately, the victims are children most of the time. And we also have lawsuits that we attract, which brings additional costs to power utilities due to the families of the deceased that want compensation for the loss of lives, although the illegal connections are done by or through the theft and vandalism route. So that's why we are pushing for normalization, and although we've got limited funding, but we are pushing for that to then be settled. And unfortunately, we have to do it in parallel, remove the illegal connections while we are also normalizing based on the capacity from a capex funding perspective.
Sure, okay. Asenathi, I'm going to give you the last say, even though you don't have the powers to sort out this electricity crisis in the city. But we're moving into local government elections. 1st of November is going to be telling. We are expecting some areas in Johannesburg to possibly, there might be some unrest because issues have just not been dealt with yet. Political parties want votes. Do you think this is ever going to be resolved? Do you think that government will ever understand that, basic things such as water, housing, electricity is our right?
Well, I mean, it has a lot to do with respecting and protecting human rights, and for the city and government as well to understand the importance and the agency of protecting and promoting human rights. There are so many options and alternatives around electricity supply. I mean, local government has the capacity to apply with the energy department for concession to source out independent power producers, which would counter and ease up on load shedding because it would now meet up the increasing demand for electricity. And I think that, I don't want to seem like I'm criticizing the city so much, but I think that there is lack of political will for these things to be done and to be achieved. Because if there was political will, we would be at a stage where we are discussing the implementation of these options.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's Advocate Tsediso Thipanyane, who's the CEO of the Human Rights Commission. We thank you for your time, as well as Asenathi Tukela, who is from the Socio-Economic Rights Institute. Thank you both so much. We're going to stick with Nancy after the break. We're going to speak about issues around vandalism and infrastructure in the city when it comes to electricity. Stay tuned to ENCA.